Chris here. I'm going to talk a little bit about instincts and drills and sort of just the methodology of what you're trying to get when you're training for self-defense or combative arts. Um, so first off, understand that what you're trained to do is change your instincts. When stressful, violent situations happen, you have instinctual responses. And that depends on the person, depends on the situation, could be a bunch of things. The reason we do training is because there are things that are more efficient. Um, Very few people in this world are, just have the right instincts to do the really good things. Most of us basically have the most basic stuff of like cover up or run or freeze up, like a bunch of different things. And your training is to try and change the instincts so that they'll be there when you need them. And so there's kind of two sides to that. There's the actual skillfulness of what's going to be more efficient, and then there is stress. And so you need to be able to bring out the skillfulness under stress. So you have people who have trained for many years. They can do a very skillful movement, and you've seen them do really awesome stuff, and they get into a street situation, all the skill disappears. They flail. They can do it. They can't do it under the correct stressors. There's people who throw people into self-defense training, just go spar a lot, spar all the time, hit all the time. You'll learn some more efficient things because obviously pain can teach you, like, well, that didn't work. I guess I'll do this. And you use what you guess kind of works more often. And you slowly build a better set of instincts. But you're racking up a lot of injury and you're basically reinventing the wheel. And the fact is, you will probably not learn some of the higher end, some of the really efficient things because you're not going to get there in time. It makes sense to learn from people who have learned something that works, and then be able to train in a way that brings it out when you need it under stress. And that's what drill training is. Now, you could do a drill where it's like one person does a thing over and over. You do the one thing 1,000 times. You're good at doing it under those one set of conditions. What you want to do is when you're comfortable in doing whatever you're trying to get from the drill, could be a position, could be can you do enough force, can you do the timing, whatever you feel comfortable with that, tell your partner and say, hey, could you do this? They're throwing a punching encounter. Hey, could you take a half step in a direction? Could you try and juke me a little before you throw the punch? Can you, come from a slightly different angle and then throw the punch? Can you, throw a 1-2? Can you, throw a punch and when I try to grab your arm, you pull it back? This is how you increase the difficulty and you change up the situation a bit. Now, you will not, in the middle of a situation, say, oh, well, I've done this 1,000 different ways. Oh, 838 is the correct technique. That's not what's going to happen. What you're doing is you're teaching yourself how to find what's comfortable and how to deal and adapt in the moment. And having this flexibility is what lets you do that. Some of that includes taking your drill to a point where you go, yeah, I'm actually not even going to use this technique at this point because this is where it stops making sense. I'll use this instead. And again, you're not going to calculate this. This is just something you're teaching your body to figure out where the edges of what makes sense and what feels good for you based on your fighting style's methodology. And so your drill, do it till you feel comfortable, then turn it up to where you don't feel comfortable, to say you have to learn something new. And same sense, like you could even take the drill where someone just does a straight punch and it's like, okay, how the person throwing the straight punch say, okay, you're just going to do the punch, but what I want you to do is get really emotionally aggressive. Like get in my face, yell at me, say all kinds of fucked up shit and, throw the punch. Now you have the stress. It's the same thing, but now you're under intense stress. So you can play with it in a lot of different ways. And what you want to be able to do is keep your skillfulness under a lot of conditions and keep your skillfulness under stress. And this is how we train every other skilled art. If you're learning first aid, you play on the dummy, and then, if you're becoming an EMT, they'll have stuff where there's an actor in the room screaming at you while you're trying to do CPR on the dummy or whatever kind of thing. They turn up the stress. And this is also true of military training. Military training, they don't just say, hey, beat the crap out of each other and see what happens. They say, here are the techniques, we're going to drill the technique, and then we're going to turn up the stress and have you do it under different conditions. I was reading this close quarters combat manual from the Army, and they had a really interesting chapter where they point out, they said, anytime we have a sparring competition, the thing is that because we're training how to really hurt each other, but we can't really hurt each other, we have to have these rules in place. And the thing is, since you know certain techniques will never be applied, you don't learn to protect against them, and then you optimize to the competition. And that's not actually helpful for the reality of it. We can take boxing. Boxing is an extremely, powerful and efficient general fighting system. Problem is, there's certain things like, in boxing, like you can get up close and get around someone and not have to protect against a knee coming up because they're not going to throw a knee. You also don't ever have to put yourself in a situation to think about you throwing a knee. And you also don't have to think about, like, what if they have buddies coming at me from the other side, or they're going to pull out a knife. You do what's efficient for winning in the ring. And that means you exclude some of the things that may happen in a situation that's not in the ring. And this is true of anything that becomes a sport art. And so the military manual basically said, okay, so because we know this is a thing, people optimize to win, within the situation. You have a sparring competition with a set of rules, in a training regimen. And then you do a different kind of sparring competition with different sets of rules. So you change up what the excluded zones are, the rules are, so that people have to change. Like, they can't optimize to one thing. They're better off just being well-rounded in all the skills you need for self-defense and combatives. This is what you're doing when you do a drill. When you do a drill, you have a strict set of rules about what you're doing, and then you change them, and then you change them. Now, when I say this isn't to say you should be taking years and years to become decently proficient. But if we look at military, and there are people who are doing stuff for combative reasons, they'll typically spend a few months learning, a general set of skills to become proficient. So it's not unreasonable to also say you will probably take a few months of combining your drills and increasing your stress, combining your drills, increasing your stress, doing some sparring, doing repeated cycles of this to get these skills in. So under stress, that becomes your first instinct. That's your goal. New instincts that work. And so use the same training methodology that works for real life, for people who are having to use it in life and death situations, because that is what you're training for. So have fun and be safe.